Welcome to Mac Stories Unwind, the show that's all about the picks. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Doing really well. We've got a couple of video game picks today. I'm really excited to dive into this. I have some thoughts on your pick, even though I haven't played your pick yet. But I want you to kick this off because I am sitting in my new house that is not set up. I have a PS5 that's sitting in a cardboard box right behind me, and so I have not been playing console games for a couple of weeks, and wanted to. And I know that you've got a pick. You've got a PS5 pick, and I want you to tell me what I can look forward to when I get this thing hooked up. Probably tomorrow, I think.
Well, good luck with that. I know that you've been looking forward to
you.
finally setting up your PS5. My pick is the new God of War Ragnarok, which just came out a couple of days ago. Came out on PS4 and PS5, but I'm playing on PS5. Now, before we talk about the game itself, I mean, obviously, there's going to be spoilers about the ending of the first, like the God of War reboot from 2018 on PS4, which was not the first God of War game in the series, but it was the sort of the reboot of the series following, the PS2, PSP, and PS3 era.
It's like the first modern version of God of War, right?
Right. It was the first modern God of War that abandoned Greek mythology for Norse mythology. So you're dealing with Odin and Thor and Baldur and all these other gods from a different mythology, not from the ancient Greek mythology. You're no longer dealing with Zeus and, Ares and all these other Greek gods. You have Norse gods. So different mythology, different setting, different combat mechanics, different everything. Before we talk about that, I also need to explain I'm playing on PS5. I have an HDMI 2.1 compatible television. So I have an LG C1. I believe John has the C2. I have the one from 2021. It's a beautiful OLED 55-inch TV that supports 120 Hz refresh rate, variable refresh rate on PS5, which is something that God of War also supports. So you can play with the, if you play with the favor performance mode, which is the recommended one for this game, you can enjoy, obviously, my TV has a gaming mode that adjusts a bunch of settings for you. HDR is enabled by default, but with variable refresh rate, what's nice is that your television's refresh rate will match the frame rate of the game, leading to a much smoother image on screen with incredible performance on PS5. So I sent you a photo of my setup last night, and in one of the first scenes of the game, I was hitting about 80 FPS with variable refresh rate activated. And that was using the default HDMI cable that ships with the PS5. You don't need any special equipment. That's an HDMI 2.1 compatible cable that ships in the box of the PlayStation 5 by default. So as long as you have a compatible TV, I really recommend the favor performance mode. Now, going into this game, and I think I mentioned this before, I decided to finally catch up on the first one. So I started playing the God of War from 2018 when it came out in 2018. I played on and off through the course of 2019, and then I stopped. I never finished the game. I paused the game when Pokemon Sword and Shield came out. And those games, and then, told this story before, they became Pokemon Sword became my pandemic game. It really saved me during the lockdowns, and they caught my attention for the next 2 years. So long story short, I had God of War paused toward the final, 70% of the story. I'm not talking about completion rate. I'm just talking about the main quest, the main story. I was more than halfway through, but it was paused, and it was constantly in my backlog bothering me. So I decided, God of War Ragnarok is coming out in November. I really need to not just brush up on the first game. I want to finish the first game. I want to finish at least the main story. And my approach was, I'm going to finish the main quest so that I know what to expect in terms of the story. That will be fresh on my mind when Ragnarok comes out. but I will not bother with all the open world side quest stuff because my assumption was all that is going to be so much better in the new game. So I just want to finish the main story, but then the proper, like doing the side quests and exploring the overworld, like all of that, I'm going to do with the new game instead. So I did that and I finished the game like a week ago. So the story was very much fresh on my mind, which definitely helps. God of War, the new one, Ragnarok, as soon as you start the game, as a recap, as an optional recap that you can watch, which is really helpful. And that's part of the many, many accessibility features that this game offers. This is one of the most inclusive games I've seen in my life.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's really good to hear. Yeah.
It's incredible. Like, you can really customize everything. You can customize, like, there's the obvious stuff like the subtitles and the size and the backgrounds, but it goes much beyond that. Like, there's audio cues that you can customize. There are multiple levels for the UI text. There's, the haptics that you can customize. There's a voiceover mode that you can activate. Like, it's super well done and inclusive. Like, and you can customize colors for everything, sizes for different types of fonts. It's really, really well done. So as soon as you start it up, it's a very welcoming experience, both for those who may have forgotten about the first God of War, as well as just players in general, like me. I mean, I wear eyeglasses. My eyesight is not fantastic. So I was very happy to see the option to bump up the text size by a couple of notches in the slider. So that was cool.
Yeah, no doubt. Because we just set up our living room and our couch is a little bit further away from our TV than it used to be. And I was thinking, as I was doing it, I was thinking, oh, this isn't going to be so great for some of those games. I'm going to have a really hard time reading it. So I'm glad to hear that you can bump up the text a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So I played for a couple of hours, like an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
This first hour and a half is really a lot of the things that you've seen from the trailers is thankfully already here. So I don't think the previous trailers and gameplay videos have spoiled much. Like that battle, that fight with Thor that you've seen in all the trailers, that's like right there at the beginning in the first hour of the game. So I was really happy to see that. In terms of the story, so we left off God of War in 2018, or if you're like me, a week ago, with Kratos and his son Atreus. They were finally able to make it to Jotunheim, this realm in the what's it called? This realm of Asgard is the realm of the gods. Midgard is the main hub. It's one of the realms of the Norse mythology. You were finally able to make it to the highest peak of Jotunheim to scatter the ashes of Kratos' wife and the mother of Atreus. That was her last wish, and you're finally able to make it there. But at what cost? And the cost of that was that obviously you had to kill a bunch of people along the way, right? But especially in the final part of the game, Atreus grows increasingly dissatisfied with his father's approach to battles and killing gods and being against Odin and all of his group of gods. Atreus wants to fight, whereas Kratos wants to teach him discipline and calm and being able to control himself. Because the thing we discover, again, toward the final part of the game, is that Atreus is also a god. More specifically, we find out that Atreus' original name was supposed to be, wait for it, John, Loki. Atreus is Loki.
Wow.
Yes. Atreus is technically Loki. Well, so the thing we discover is that the mother of Atreus, or the late wife of Kratos, her name is Faye, we discovered that she was actually a giant. She was part of the tribe of the giants that were banished by Odin and sort of banned to this Jotunheim realm, where they all died, by the way. But Faye was able to make a new life for herself, meet with Kratos, marry Kratos, have Atreus with Kratos. But she withheld all of this information from them. And so right there at the very end, you find this mural in the last realm that you travel to. And this mural shows, and that was very, very cool, shows past, present, and future events. Like, it's an ancient mural that shows all the things you've done in the game, even the ones you just did. So the idea was that Faye was able to predict everything that Kratos and Atreus would do, because there was a prophecy for the two of them. She knew exactly that, for example, Kratos would kill Baldur, which is one of the main characters, son of Odin and Freya, that you kill toward the end of the first game. But this prophecy predicted everything. And on the mural, you see all of these things. And unfortunately, and this is like right there, one of the very last scenes of the game, you find out that the giants used to refer to Atreus as Loki, but Kratos insisted for calling him Atreus instead, after the name of a fallen hero of Sparta. But his original name, as decided by the giants, was Loki. He's a god, obviously. He's the son of the god of war and a giant. So he's both a giant and a god, actually. And in this mural, you see that in the future part of the prophecy, you see this painting of Atreus standing over a dying Kratos. And so Kratos looks at it and is like, and basically that hints at, if this prophecy is accurate, well, bad things are going to happen to Kratos. And the game ends with you scatter the ashes, you go back, there's the credits roll, then you go back to your house, you go to sleep, and there's this scene that the first game suggests it was a dream, but you wake up in the middle of the night as you're sleeping, there's a storm, and you see this thunder outside the house, and the first game ends with Kratos, opening the door, rain is pouring down, there's a thunderstorm, and there's a man standing in front of their house. And Kratos yells, "Who are you?" like that. And you see this person from behind, so you don't see his face. He just moves his his cape to the side, and you just see the hammer of Thor on his left hip. And the game ends there. Now, that scene that you thought, that's a dream, like, I don't know, is that a prophecy? Like the first game just ends there. That scene is actually one of the first fights in God of War Ragnarok. So, you pick up, a couple of years have passed. As we know from the first game, a winter season has started and has never stopped. They refer to this winter season as Fimbulwinter, which is the precursor of Ragnarok. Ragnarok being this like final battle that ends with the end of the world, basically. And the prophecy is set, and it's like, well, there's nothing we can do. This winter season has started. Ragnarok is coming. We're all gonna die. You, in theory, want to stop this battle, but at the same time, the game starts with with a grown-up Atreus. He's a teenager now, and he wants answers, right? The boy has been trained by his father for the past couple of years that have passed from the ending of the first game. They've been killing animals, they've been killing raiders, they've been killing all these mercenaries. Like, he's been training and he's bored. He wants some action, he wants to fight Odin and the other gods, and he wants to go to Asgard, and he wants to find Tyr, which is another figure, like another character from the first game. Like, the boy wants answers, and Kratos won't give them to him. And so right there in this first hour of the game, there's this tension, more palpable than in the first game between them. Atreus is capable of other things now, like he can cast spells. And at one point it's a very eventful first hour of the game. Like, he transforms into a bear
Oh, wow.
which is wild. Yeah. It's a very eventful first hour. Odin and Thor show up. It's beautiful voice acting, by the way. I don't remember the name of the actor who plays Odin, but like it captured, like it steals the stage right away. Excellent performance for the actor who plays Odin. And yeah, like the story is immediately intriguing. Odin and Thor propose you. They offer you this deal. Kratos says no. I don't want to spoil other details. It leads to the very much publicized fight with Thor, and you can immediately appreciate some of the combat mechanic changes. So by and large, this game, I mean, it looks nicer than the first God of War. You can tell it's more detailed, you can tell it was optimized for the PS5, and you can immediately feel the haptics. Like you can tell that the DualSense was really being taken advantage of this time. You have this, it's very subtle, but every like movement in the game has a different sort of texture on the DualSense. It's really nicely done. But and the combat, I mean at least what I've seen so far, it's very similar to the first one, but there are some additions. Like there's a different charge attack. You can now charge your axe to frost it, and then you can throw it, and it does more damage. And that's very cool because you can just hold triangle, you're gonna frost your axe, and it's like a charge attack, and it's really nice because it adds this different dimension. And yeah, I mean the fight with Thor is immediately epic, and I don't want to spoil it, but it's like a multi-stage thing. And then, this first hour and a half serves as like a recap and like an onboarding like tutorial, but it's more than a tutorial. I mean, I died a couple of times. So
Right.
yeah, based on what I've seen so far, the story is immediately intriguing. The voice acting is excellent. It looks beautiful on PS5, and I am keen to play more. The only problem, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet come out in a week. So
Yes, it's amazing to think that it's only a week away. Yeah, it's going to be quite a fall for games. I mean, I'm looking forward to that too. It's interesting. I mean, that I'm glad to hear that there is an easy on-ramp for people who maybe didn't play the last game, because I did. I only just started the last game. We've had it forever. My kids have played it, but I had never played it. And about a couple of weeks ago, I played it for a couple of hours and loved it. But I just have been in the middle of moving and haven't had the chance to really dig in, and there's no way I'm going to get to the end of it. So I think I'm just going to pick up with the new game and do the recap and go from there, because as you said, with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet coming out in a week, I've got more than enough to play without going back and playing back catalog at this point. All right, Federico, let me hit you with a game too. And this one is an iOS and iPadOS game called Isle of Arrows. Now, this is a tower defense game. And back in the day, I was deep into tower defense games. I really, really love tower defense games. But the thing about tower defense games is that, at least some of the early ones that I played in the early days of the App Store, is that once you figured out kind of the formula for the way the enemies worked and the different pieces worked for defending your tower, they became kind of formulaic and a little boring, because you could basically perfect them to a degree. The thing about Isle of Arrows is it's a much deeper game. It's got that kind of 3/4 isometric view that reminds me of Monument Valley a little bit. Really great artwork. And it's at its core, it is a tower defense game in that there's a path that enemies are traveling on to get to a gem, and you're trying to keep them from doing that. And you've got hearts that are depleted every time the enemy captures your gem. And if your hearts, go down to 0, then the game's over. And the thing that's a little different, though, is that it all takes place on an island, which means you have limited space. And so as you lay down, the way it works is it's turn-based, and it uses a card system. So it's a little bit like a turn-based card game where a card comes up, and maybe it's an arrow tower, for instance, and you place the arrow tower to where you think would be a good strategic place for it. and then you end your turn, and a wave of enemies come, and you see how you do. And then you pick another card and you lay that down, and maybe it's a piece of path to make the path that the enemies have to go on longer. But because you're on an island, you run out of space eventually, except that there are certain cards that can expand the size of your island and allow you to build bridges and do all kinds of things. Because there's, there are water tiles, there are even things like gardens, fishing shacks. It's not just weapons and paths. It's all different pieces of towns that you're building that have different properties. Like maybe if you plant a garden near a particular kind of other tile, you get more coins each time you play a turn. And in all, there are like 50 plus different kinds of tiles, which means you really don't, the number of options are almost limitless, and it really adds a new dimension to the kind of game. And what I really like too is the way that it's turn-based makes it a lot less anxiety inducing. I mean, I think sometimes tower defense games, you feel like there's a constant onslaught of enemies. And here it's like nice, low key soothing music. You're placing these tiles and looking at the cards, and you can kind of read about what there's little instructions about what each card can do, and you place them down. And then then you're in charge of letting the enemies start assaulting your setup. And I've just found it to be one of those games that's a lot deeper than your typical tower defense game. It's made by a guy named Daniel Lutz, who was the creative director on Hitman Go and Lara Croft Go at Square Enix. And
nice. Okay.
Yeah, there is definitely, once you know that, you can kind of see how that is and see the influence there. But it's got such depth that you really don't get bored with it. And at the same time, it's like one of those games that you can play in small spurts. Works really well with mobile because it's turn-based. So you can always just stop at the end of a turn and come back later. And the various stages through the game have a certain number of attacks that you're going to have to withstand to advance on to the next level. I think it starts with like a level that's maybe 25 enemy attacks, and the next one's like 40, and you go on from there. And there's so many different aspects to building things up with the cards, tearing down existing structures and replacing them, and dealing with things like coins and other things that allow you to either skip turns. I didn't even mention there's like periodically there are bonus cards that come up and you can kind of build extra stuff. And so it's all done in a way that really keeps you guessing, and you never really quite feel as though you've solved the game, which I really like because it makes it more interesting.
Yeah, that sounds very cool.
Yeah, it's a really good one. It's brand new, came out in October, so check it out. This was one of my picks for Club Max Stories. I did a collection of 3 games I've been playing recently on iOS and iPadOS, and so this was 1/3 of the picks. If you want the other picks, you got to join the club at plus.club, right? All right. Federico, that's it for today. Thanks for all the info on God of War. I'm glad you didn't go too much further in the storyline. I'm really looking forward to setting up my PS5 this weekend and digging in myself. We'll be back next week. You can find Federico and I over at macstories.net. You can also find us on Twitter, at least for the time being, where Federico is at Vitici. That's VITICCI. And you can find us on Instagram, where Federico is also at Vitici. And I am at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.